Awesome and welcome. I'm here with Shinjini today. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's awesome to connect. I've been following your content for a while, and you've done, I think, a lot of really, really cool stuff on Twitter. And I know you're exploring and doing some other stuff on other platforms. But for anyone that doesn't know you, when somebody says like that question that I think a lot of us get that I hate, but we're probably used to is like, what do you do? How do you answer that?
So, I think I'd describe myself as a business brand strategist who uses brand psychology to break industries and to bend the will of the market towards you.
That is super cool and well said. How do you do that, right? Like when you talk about
Yeah.
brand psychology or bending the market, can you explain what you mean there?
So, I focus less on what everyone talks about, meaning the looks of the brand or the looks of your product or maybe even the value that you're offering. Those are bare minimum, and they are things that you need to get to. But my focus is on how you use brand psychology, on how you tap into the minds of your audience and basically make something so irresistible that it's exactly what they need. You don't have to put in effort into becoming almost desperate to sell to them. They should be desperate to want you. And that takes a good amount of thinking, that takes a good amount of strategy. And it's playing the long term game to become involatile. Because you could have a great product, you could be selling out right now, but it's not to say that you'll be selling out later. So, to really become someone that stays, not someone that's here but might go later, that's where I come in.
That is super cool. And can you talk a little bit about like what are some elements of brand psychology that are overlooked a bit? Because I think what you're getting at is something really deep there, right? There's a reason that we all buy or that we all engage or that we love certain products, whatever it is. But like, what are the like if you had to sort of narrow it down to like a couple pillars or like a mental model of you're explaining this to somebody new, how would you explain it?
So, first of all, I want to say that this part is unglamorous. It's the part that you won't immediately see moving the needle, or it's not like an ad that you post and you'll be like, oh, I'm selling out. Awesome. It's stuff that you have to reach inside, deep down, to fix the small issues that are going to hold you back from staying long term. So, for example, why are you even here? Like, why is your product here? What is the long game? It can't just be to solve this one particular problem. And usually I see this with brands, they're not even able to narrow that down. Maybe because they're doing so many things. But what is the one problem? If you had to say it in one sentence, what do? They falter. They're not able to put it across. And because of that, their efforts are so scattered that even though they might be doing things that might work, there's still that might factor, right? And how do you eliminate that? You get down to your why. You have to determine what kind of brand are you. So in terms of, like, how we have our personality, we kind of our brain thinks in images. So we kind of view an image of each other, of ourselves, colors, words, pictures, emotions. We associate that with people or like anything really. So you have to humanify your brand. You have to make it into something tangible, imagine it into something tangible when in fact it is not. And you can't exactly succeed into doing that, but it is a start. You have to try to think what emotions your brand has to tap into. Your why, your brand voice, your brand personality, these are all important pillars that are very much overlooked usually. And you might go into it thinking that all I need is a great product. And that is true. Like, you need a great product. But if you want to stay here once, sure. If you want to stay here forever, no. That's just the truth of it. It's not gonna work.
That is super cool and well said. And I love the piece that you said about the why and almost this like getting it down to this like single sentence. And it reminds me of it was, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos both had this like single ordinating principle. Like for Musk, it was like, is this going to get us to Mars when he was building, SpaceX? And if the answer was no, like they're not doing it. It was that simplistic. With Amazon, it was, does this improve the customer experience? And if no, we're not doing this. But it's like it's getting super super specific with that. When you're making the jump and you're helping somebody like go from that why, which is a big thing, right? Like that's like there's so much work that you have that you're sort of doing to really like so many questions, I'm sure, and like so much sort of narrowing down that you're doing to do that. But when you get into this sort of space that you're talking about of emotions and what you're evoking and your brand pillars and the voice, like how are you coaching people to think about those things? Like how are you coaching them to take the why and then the like to actualize that?
Okay, that's a great question. How to take your why and actualize that. So, the first thing is that people want to buy from you if you are making them agree with you on a version of themselves that they want to be in the future. You have to show them that this is something I want to be a part of. That is what you need to portray. So now, when it comes down to yourself, you need to dig deep down and decide what's something you stand so strongly for. And taking, there are little symbols. It's not something that's like you make one move and that's how you show your why and you list it out and done. No, it's not one and done. It's about the small visuals you put out. It's about the words you say. Are you becoming comical or are you serious? So when we, for example, think about Apple, they completely transformed the game for a reason, because they decided their why is taking electronics to be something that's far out of reach, that requires a lot of knowledge, to something that's a given for becoming the peak of creativity. That's something that's cutting edge, something you cannot miss on. If you want to be successful, if you want to be someone who's breaking boundaries. So that is a message, that is their why that they decided on and they conveyed very clearly. And even though their prices are exorbitant compared to their competitors, regardless of the product is great, but it still has faults, right?
Hmm.
And they're not breaking every boundary in the mistakes they're making. They have their faults, but people will still circle back to them. Why? There's a big why there. You have a certain intangible feeling towards them. That's their why, that's the emotion that they convey.
That is, it's so deep and it's so true, right? Because there's these this resonance that those brands have with us that just sort of seems to like give an impermanence and a like and a connection and do. And the tip that you gave around like, because I want to sort of underscore this and maybe have you say it again, but like, does this fit the future version of you? Like I think that's such an awesome filter
I love
for,
that.
yeah, like does this fit the future? And if the answer is no, and if like the offer that you have to somebody doesn't fit the sort of future version of it, then the answer is automatically no, I'd assume.
Yeah, and you know what you said about you decide on a certain value for your brand, and if your actions are not in alignment, you just decide not to do them. That's exactly the point, because it becomes almost like a grounding pillar, that it's like a self check. Are you doing the right thing? If not, okay, we can check this way. And that's how the best brands do it. For example, Microsoft, they've got a great product. They worked, but the thing is they're volatile. And now their competitors are doing like almost as well as them. There's a reason for that, and people love Microsoft. It's not a question about the quality of their product, but when you think of Microsoft, it's not like you're like, oh, I need to buy this because, well, it makes me feel a certain way. No, it's just like, yeah, it's good. I should buy it. But with Apple, you're like, oh, I need that. It's like
And
non-negotiable. It's
yeah,
quality.
and the piece that you said before is sort of really sort of resonating because I have an Apple computer and it's like it's like this weird like identity thing that you have, right? Where
Yeah.
it's just like you associate yourself with like the brand of different things. And um, so what I think what you're saying there is really, really deep. How did you arrive at this sort of niche, and how did you sort of like find this really interesting intersection, right? Because what you said before, I think, is really right. Like when people talk about branding, you have so many consultants on Upwork or these different spaces on Twitter, wherever. So like that can sort of very much sort of give you simple brand guidelines that you can work with and that do a reasonably good job of sort of working through some of the like visual appearance and the different pieces. What you're talking about, I think, is something really deep. And I'd love to know like how'd you arrive there?
So basically, I started on Twitter, right, with the whole branding journey. And initially, I did not step into it thinking I will get into this niche. I just went for it. And eventually, what I was doing, I was deciding to come off as a very particular, strong personality on Twitter. I was very mindful about the impression I was trying to make through every small thing that people were not noticing, maybe, but the effect was happening. They were just not realizing that this is what is affecting my thinking towards her. So that's when I realized I'm actually really enjoying this. And it just naturally came to me, and people were asking me for advice on branding. So it was just something that I kind of toppled into. And then I started deep diving into it. And I realized that I can't limit myself to just branding on Twitter because it's one platform, it's one audience, it's one type of crowd that is coming in with one type of mindset, which is not maybe suitable to what I want to do. And it was working, everything was working, but I was not happy. And that is when I realized that this is probably what happens with a lot of brands. It works once, but they're not happy with it, and they realize this is not going to last forever. The longevity is not there. So what do you do? And it actually took me quite a long time, and it took me a lot of deep reflection, a lot of thinking about what I want, about my values, to realize, wait, every brand needs to do this too. Like, this is what actual branding is. You are a brand. You are already a brand. What you are constructing, your intentions, your actions, all of it is already a brand. But how do you channel that energy? That is what true branding is. It's not the small, oh, maybe I should make this post, or maybe I should post this ad. Like marketing, that's marketing, where you focus in on the performance, and that is also important. But if marketing does not have the base of branding, then it's again just cheap efforts that will result into cheap outcomes that are short term and not long term. And I realized I want to be long term. So I was like, gotta expand.
Gotta expand. I think the advice that you just had there around like really digging deep in the why, it's so good for branding. It's so important for like the sort of like holistic brand and sort of self of whether you're running a, 10,000 person company or, a single sort of business person business. But I think it's also true that like that advice applies holistically to so many different things. Like if you're a there's so many people that talk about productivity and like 10xing results and those kind of things, but if you're not like super clear on your why and what you're trying to do with your efforts, like you're going to be scattershotted. Like if you don't have that
Yeah.
clarity of like mission and vision, like you're just going to be wasting energy. And I think there's a lot of people that are like high on tactics and low on clarity, right? And that are sort of like pushing stuff out there and doing different things without necessarily sort of like putting in that like that thoughtful reflection on what and why.
I think a lot of people right now, they're so focused on like the value they want to put out, the how high tech their product is, how jam packed full of worth can their product be for the price that they're asking. And you know what? It's so important. I can't discount that, but have you ever thought that it's replaceable? Then maybe whatever you've learned, anyone else can learn it from you, or maybe from somewhere else. It's just information at the end of the day. It's just thoughts and words, like that's about it. What about the part outside of that? Like, what is the experience that you're offering? What is the intangible part that you're offering? That is what makes your brand. It's not actually just the value that you're offering. That's kind of the bare minimum. Otherwise, why are you existing if you're not solving a problem effectively in the first place? But the experience that you're offering while solving that problem, that's what you are. That's what your brand is essentially. Because think about it in terms of dolls. Why is everyone so obsessed with Barbie versus any other doll? Why? Even though, and you know what, Barbie is hopping onto it. Any pink product right now, so hyped with prices, clothes, anything, like take anything. Why? And it's working. People will buy that. They will buy absolutely that. And we think that we're above these things, that we can outmaneuver these tactics or whatever you might call it, but all of us fall prey to it in some or the other case, in terms of cars, in terms of electronics, in terms of clothes. They're all attached to this identity that we can never escape, because that's what makes us human. And that human part of it, that little bubble, that's what your brand is. How effectively can you convey that? That is what your brand is. It's not the value.
That is so, it's so deep, and I mean, I think you're hitting on so many sort of like, I think very sort of, to your, you use your words, like human traits that we have, right? And it's so funny, right? Because I think like whether a brand is like super establishment or anti-establishment, or like, very sort of like niche or sort of like focus on different things, the really strong ones are all communicating these like really sort of like core
Yeah.
elements, right? And like for you, when you're working with, whether it's a personal brand or a B2B kind of client, like how are you sort of like, you're doing the whys, right? And you're doing a lot of this, the really sort of smart questions, and having people dig deep about that value and the sort of the intangibles, and that's like really important. Is there a piece of like customer discovery in there, or is there like, how are you sort of like thinking of that kind of piece, or how are you testing those different pieces with people, to really sort of like see that sort of resonance, right? Because it's like you can sort of very much, I think there's maybe a dissonance between like the the feeling that somebody could have about their personal
Yeah.
brand, and then like how it's like received, right?
Yeah, so basically, it's very personalized, right? To every personal brand, everyone's at very different stages and awareness levels. But basically, how to transform that into actions is where the magic happens, right? And it depends all on your product or what you're offering. That then you go to platforms. Are you something that's going so large scale that you will go into traditional advertising also, maybe billboards? Because then again, the game changes. Are you going into, say, Facebook advertising? Because again, then the game changes. But before all of that, you have to really break it down. We've already discussed this, but it's so important. You have to break it down into sort of imagine one page where you write down everything that you do, why you do it, who are you doing it for. So your audience, that's very important. These are basically the first steps: determining the audience persona or the market persona. What do they look like? What do they do in their daily basis? How old are they? How much are they earning? Where are they? Stuff like that. What gender are they? Like, it has to be so specific, and specificity, even though it's believed otherwise, has its advantages. Rather than, so instead of tackling a big pool, people don't realize that you're also having a bigger pool of competitors. When you're tackling a small pool, you have a smaller number of competitors. This is the part that people don't focus on, and they decide, let's not niche down, let's just go all crazy, let's do everything. But no, micro offers, micro products, that's where the magic is, that's where the real money is. So how do you do that? How does a business get into that? Because every business, every person, a lot of the times, especially the ones that I like working with, they have this big idea, they have this big goal, and that's awesome. But to actually get there, you need small steps. That's where the branding comes in. So breaking it down into really small steps of what's the next step? Who do you want to target next? What's their awareness level? Are they even aware they have a problem? Are they unaware? Are they kind of aware they have a problem, but it's not painful enough? So, do we need to make it painful enough? That's one stage. Are they already aware it's painful enough, but they just don't have that right kind of solution that's showing them that there is a better side of this life that's possible? Where are we on that? So, deciding the awareness level is the next step. Then you decide what your brand persona is going to be. And it does not have to be, it's not dependent at all. If in case you're not a personal brand, it's not dependent at all on what who you are. It's basically about who you want, how you want to project as a brand. What's the one emotion you want to tap into? Again, the rule of one coming back here, the rule of specificity coming back here, niching down, all of that. Then you go into the visual part of it. Then you decide the colors, the looks, and so on and so forth. But on the basis of what your audience persona, your then you decide how to position yourself. Once you've gotten down how your audience looks, who you want to target, you decide how you want to position yourself. Do you want to position yourself as a friendly, maybe approachable brand that is for every Tom, Dick, and Harry? Or do you want to position yourself as something that's super premium that not everyone can get to? And the thing is, there is no good or bad in this. There is to some point, but you can target anyone, it just has to be mindful and it has to be right. So, having experience in knowing what is right and wrong, that's where the branding comes in.
That is, it's so good. I love you. You said so many great things there. And I think you went beyond this sort of like concept of just like you've got your ideal customer persona, and I think a lot of people are sort of familiar with like how to do that, and some of what those exercises went there. But something I think you elaborated on and said that I like have to sort of underscore because I think it's just so smart is like what's that single emotion that you want for your brand, and like what's the one thing, and if I'm wrong about like how I'm sort of like communicating this, let me know, but I think that's so powerful and smart, and I would love for you to like when you were thinking about your brand and your positioning on Twitter, and how did you come to that, like how did you think about what's the one thing I want to do, and knowing that it's probably sort of changed a little bit over time, but how'd you land on what you have right now?
So, my personal brand has been through its transformation, but my goal was always to be kind of magical, to be kind of mystical, to be kind of on the brink of breaking boundaries. I wanted to be someone that is in everyone's minds, that is always remembered in that magical sort of way. Almost like she has some secret ingredient that nobody knows about. Like she's talking about everything, but there's something secret that she's not fully sharing. That's the vibe I wanted to go for. And this sounds so, it's coming back down to the basics, pen and paper, but it actually just came to me when I was thinking about it. I was just sitting alone thinking about it. I tried so many things. I tried um, seeing examples of other brands. None of it works. You can't just copy someone, first of all. That's one advice. You do not copy someone.
Don't do that.
And I was thinking, what if I was some sort of superhuman? What would I imagine myself doing? And I was constantly seeing myself like breaking these kind of walls that are constructed by us, that are holding us back. Just so unfortunate, but it's true. So I imagine myself disrupting that, kind of demolishing it, kind of causing this explosion. And that's how I came down to my branding, that that's what I want to do. So again, this is not glamorous. It did not happen overnight. It takes time. It takes a lot of reflection, a lot of thinking. But it comes back down to who you truly are and who you want to be. And since it's my personal brand, it came down to who I am, right? And that's how I came down to it. My brand.
I think that's really insightful, and I think you were when we're talking about in a more sort of like, sort of strategic way, like how you're sort of coaching a different brand versus like how you're doing that yourself. I think you just sort of threaded the needle between the two of like, like here's how I really drilled down and did it. And, it sounded like you had to sort of like, you knew the concept and you had to sort of like work through it and like, and build in public and do those different steps while you were doing it. But you kind of knew the direction that you were going.
Yeah.
Um, and you were able to sort of like arrive at that through a combination of, I think, like that sort of deep internal work, but also like putting content out there and actively doing it. It wasn't just like you thought of it, it was just like you're putting stuff out there and you're almost sort of like teasing at it to find it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's perfect. And I just the bigger dream that I have is that I just how should I frame this? I kind of hope every business, every personal brand, every brand out there has an intention. It's not just to, kind of to break the phenomenon that there is that everyone's out to get money and everyone is out to just buy, sell. I'll take what you have and give you something. Maybe it's more so. I hope that everyone's out there to cause change, like to actually shift, to actually cause movements, not just do the small step, buy, sell, whatever, regular stuff. Like that's part of it, but you should have a bigger vision. You should have a bigger picture on where do you fit in this world? Why are you born and how are you causing that change? How are you making it happen? How are you breaking those walls? First for yourself and then teaching others how to do it and causing that small shift in the world to maybe cause a larger butterfly effect eventually to inspire someone else to do that. You don't know, maybe you're not the next Steve Jobs, but you're inspiring someone else to do that. You don't know what kind of effect you're having. But the important thing is that you're so mindful of your intentions with it that the moves that you're making, the next step that you're taking is causing some sort of inspiration. You're creating constantly this energy that is thriving, that is causing the world to come to this place to thrive with you.
That's so powerful, and I just I love the intentionality behind that message, and really really powerful. You've talked a little bit about, or you've actually talked quite a bit about sort of directly about like the mistakes that you're seeing brands make, right, or the lack of vision that some sort of have, or the emphasis on sort of like tactical, like over really sort of like deeper meaning, or the lack of focus and not sort of being there. But like, what are some of the other things that you're seeing, the mistakes that you sort of see as somebody that like understands the deeper psychology and the intentionality has been like very intentional about how you sort of put content out and the emotions that you're evoking and all of those things when you're looking at content on Twitter or other places, like what makes you just go like just go nuts, like what's the stuff
Yeah.
that like drives you crazy?
So I think the first thing is about the biggest mistake that people are making is positioning. And this might, I've already spoken about this, but I think when you're not able to decide what sort of pedestal you're speaking from, you will be going up and down, left and right, everywhere, and you won't know where you stand. And that's when you won't know what you're offering. And when you don't know what you're offering, guess what? Who's going to come to you? Either super confused freebie seekers or basically no one. So when you have to know what kind of are you speaking to people that are on like one step lower than you? Are you speaking to big industries that are like way ahead of you, but you can help them in this micro niche way? Are you speaking to students that are maybe just starting out, they want to invest, they want to grow? Are you speaking to that kind of crowd and then making yourself an authority that's also relatable but at the same time still an authority? All of that, there's a lot of thinking that goes into play there. So I think positioning is one of the very big mistakes that brands are making right now. not knowing the crowd that you're speaking to. So, for example, Bud Light, it's a very big beer brand. Everyone knows of the screw up that they did. They forgot who they were speaking to. Such a big brand, and still such a small, like, key mistake that they made was this: they spoke to the wrong people. In turn, whoever they had lost it. And so I think that is super important. Um, the next mistake, I think, I'm sorry, I'm kind of blank. Um,
Position is huge. I mean, like I think you just underscored it there, and the Bud Light example is exactly right. Like they were just completely forgot who their key audience was, and I think they were outsourcing a lot of this. Not outsourcing, but like their executives, I think, were completely removed from their base
yeah.
audience and were making decisions like in a small room that weren't representative of like who they were sort of speaking to. So I think that's a perfect example. Um, you've started this despite despite being a student and having like a lot going on. What advice would you have for somebody starting, right? And I think like your message around sort of intentionality and focus and all the sort of deeper meaning pieces, I think are just so critical. You've been so thoughtful about how you sort of position stuff. Like, so what would be your advice for somebody that like maybe is working in a gig that they don't like, or is thinking about this creator journey, or really sort of just starting out? How would you advise them and really sort of starting and positioning themselves?
I think, first of all, I would say that don't think it's going to happen overnight, and don't rush the process, because you know what, the process is going to take its time. You're the one rushing, and the process is here, and you're like going at top speed, and then you realize, oh, you have to come back and go with the process anyway. So there's no point rushing it. You will come to your own conclusions at your own time, when especially when you're dealing with the creator economy. You have a personal brand. You will take your time as a business owner, as a personal brand. Your brand will go through changes. It's not going to be the one you started. Don't even think that way. But the important thing is being intentional and being true to yourself, as I've reiterated. Second thing is identify the dissonance that you want to target. So the part where a lot of people are losing out on making their brand almost like explosive in terms of sales, success, everything, is not really going hard in on the dissonance. So what is that small tipping factor, that small pain point that you're not really focusing on, that will make your audience go crazy, that will make your audience go, oh my god, they know exactly what they're talking about. I need to, I need to buy from them. They are exactly who I want to be. So small checkpoints I have when I'm doing that for my personal brand is this something my audience needs to know? Is this something, if I was on a cliff, I had to shout it out to a bunch of people, would I be shouting this out? Is this really what I would say? Not putting stuff out is better than putting stuff out unintentionally. That's so important, because the intention you pour is the retention you receive. And we all know that retaining people, retaining buyers is so much more easier than getting new ones, right? So the marketing principles, all of that basic stuff still holds true. And we need to remember it, work by it, all of that. And I think when you're starting out, we feel so overwhelmed with the information overload. We feel like doing what everyone is doing. You could try it, you will try it, in fact, but you need to form your own conclusions, otherwise, you'll just become like everyone else. That small difference is where you will win, in fact. That small part where you're not doing stuff like everyone else is where you win. So try to find your magic it factor. And you will not realize it immediately. It's not something you'll be learning. So you have to realize that this is not some lack of information, but it's lack of clarity within yourself of what is your natural it factor, what have you always been shining through on. That is what your brand will come through on. That is what you're really charging for. That is what people will really come to you for. Some people are just charismatic, enigmatic. You buy from them for that reason. It's not because of what they're offering. It is because of that, but the real reason you're buying from them instead of someone else is that some people are articulate, so you would want to learn speaking from them. It's those small things that really shine through. That's what you need to realize before someone else does. That's basically what is making all of your competition null. Like once you realize that nobody can do it better than you, even though it's one character trait, but nobody can do it better than you because you're born with it, kind of. So
Yeah,
I think
that's
that's the biggest advice.
so insightful. I did this exercise, and I've gotten it in a few different places. I've been sort of working it through with a few different people. I taught it in this class, like a like previous job, but it's called like finding your superpower. But it's like the interesting thing about it is like most people, what I've learned is like discount the thing that they do best because it's so easy for them and it's just like so intuitive that like they don't necessarily like know its power to others or in the market or whatever, right? So like it's pretty simple of like, you know, like five, 3 to 5 people that know you particularly well, particularly people that have sort of worked around you and like, and you ask them like, what's the thing that you'd steal from me if you could? And
Yeah.
it, it like because like people just devalue the thing that they're sort of really good at, but to kind of to like the point that you've made a few different times around sort of like iteration and putting stuff out and asking the deeper questions, even if you have that, like it just doesn't like magically like show up. You don't just like if you know what your superpower is, you don't just all of a sudden like hop on Twitter and like start tweeting about it or like
Yeah.
like there's still this like messy process of like that you need to get to like really like position that and like find it. Something else you said that was like I thought so like insightful was like the piece around dissonance and like and really sort of getting deep around like what's the dissonance that they're having and how do you tease that out more? Like I really love that because I find that like that pain point piece like people aren't really sort of like getting circumspect about enough.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of ignorant to say that you can ignore the numbers and the tactics, because once you do this unglamorous work almost is when you're ready to do the glamorous work of deciding, okay, this is where I'm missing sales, this is where I'm not, this is probably how I should put out my next advertising, this is not what I should put out. And it's a lot of trial and error, a lot of data analysis, along with tying into coming back to the basics. Why are you doing this? Who are you doing it for? How are you planning to do it? It's and it's again remembering that rule of specificity, that you can't serve to everyone. You can serve to one though, and just it's always like, from what I've noticed in my experience, it's a back and forth. You make these mistakes and then you realize, oh, it's the same thing happening in this area, rectify again. Oh, it's the same thing happening in this area, rectify again. And it's just takes a lot of time, experience, whatnot.
It really does. I've certainly sort of gone through that process myself in a few different areas of business. Shinjini, where can people find you and learn more about you and connect and that kind of thing?
So you can find me on Twitter. That's where I've built my personal brand, and you can DM me and you can mail me. We can maybe hop on call if it seems right. And yeah,
Awesome. I'll link in the show notes for everybody so you can sort of find it. Thank you. This is super insightful. Like I walked away with like 5 different tips, and I'm pumped to actually go back through the episode and just sort of like highlight a few of these because you give like so many great ordinating principles for like how do you focus down and like find that thing, like find that thing that's like really resonant and unique about you, and how do you position this? It goes so much more deeper than I think a lot of the sort of surface level things that you know that people really sort of focus on for branding. So thank you.
thank you so much, Mike. And it's been awesome speaking to you. I think it's been awesome just it was like inside of me, and I just wanted to share this knowledge because there's such a big disparity of like people not having this realization. And then it feels good to, being able to close this gap between people's minds, between what they're doing right now and what they actually should be doing. And finally getting that feeling of, wow, yeah, this is aligned with me and this is what I should be doing.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.